Welcome to Huskers HQ Overtime, presented by Tom Densdale. I'm Jack Sheard. With me is Husker football expert Terry Douglas. We're going to talk some Husker football today, and I was a little shocked at this New Mexico State game. The 3-5-3 we talked about must not have had a run defense because Nebraska was running the ball again.
Right, 330 yards by far a season high. Nebraska, this was the game that they were looking for on the ground. One of the things that they came up with in studying this defense was that teams that were successful against it had a very simplified plan, and that plan for Nebraska was obviously pound in the middle of it. All the I-backs got involved, and the offensive line played one of its best games. And I really do think that you can't overlook the return of Leiden Murtha into the starting lineup. A guy had been out the first two games, and just his athleticism and experience at that right tackle position, I think, showed up big.
And we talked about last week the rotation of the I-backs and how that would affect the running game. Seemed to work this time. Each of them had their good game.
Right. Marlon Lucky, the guy who can't run inside, is no good. You got to throw him to the scrap heap. Gets over 100 yards, looks like the guy that everyone expected at the beginning of this year, a guy returning 1,000-yard back. Quentin Castile, a nice game, and Roy Halu, the guy that everybody was clamoring for, wanted him in the starting lineup. Maybe not as big a game, but also showed he had some bright spots. So I think this rotation that showed last week can work, that has more to do with the guys up front than the guys in the I-back spot.
And the guys up front on the other side of the ball really came through there as the Aggies were about to score a couple times and then didn't. What's up with this?
Right, red zone defense.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Defense, yes. Last year was kind of a sore point. Nebraska stopped teams 6 times out of 51, or 5 times, excuse me, out of 51 attempts in the red zone. Already this year, they've stopped teams 6 times out of 14. So there's a completely different attitude. I think that Nebraska's offense or defensive staff approaches it a little bit differently. They really don't want to give up those points, and we saw that Saturday night when they called timeout with 2 seconds left in a 31-point game to set their defense because they didn't want New Mexico State to get a cheap touchdown. Now, obviously, that didn't mean anything to the game, but I think it speaks to building the attitude of this team that they're just not going to give up points easily.
One of those key players on that defensive line was subbing for another player, and now Allen's hurt. Pierre Allen's hurt. What's going to happen here?
Right, as foot injury, they don't believe it to be terribly serious. He probably could have came back in that game. They expect him to be ready to go for Virginia Tech as long as he has a good week of practice. And
they get an extra week of practice. Got an off week this week to look forward to a couple more easy puff games here to start the season. They've got to play Virginia Tech, who is decent. Missouri, who's not bad. Okay. Texas Tech, they can throw the ball a little bit.
Not too bad on their home field, though.
Yeah. So, wow, that's a tough stretch.
Yeah, the first 3 games of the season, you know, this was kind of the warm-up for this year. This first gauntlet, 3-game stretch, this is going to be very telling about Nebraska. And I would say the Virginia Tech game starting off is going to give us a better picture of what we're looking at as far as this Nebraska team goes. And it's a stretch where, you know, if they can come out 2-1, I think they'd be thrilled, realistically. Obviously, they're going to try to win every one. 2-1, even 1-2 with playing competitively, I think would not be a bad stretch for this team.
That's something we've talked about, that maybe it's not so much the record for these 3 games, but how they play and how that sets the stage for the rest of the season. If they go 0-3, regardless of how well they play, how is that going to affect this team going forward?
Right. You know, who knows what it's going to do with the team. Obviously, there's going to be fans who are going to be jumping off the edge saying, well, I knew this Bo Pelini is never going to get the job done. But seriously, if they go 0-3 and play the kind of football that that Bo Pelini was brought here to have them play, to play intense, never quit, never give in, I don't think you're going to see quite the things that you had last year where the team appeared to be giving up 60, 70 points in a game. You know, they may get dominated, they may get beat bad, but I don't think you'll see the type of blowout you saw last year.
On the flip side, Nebraska goes 3-0. Where do I get my national championship T-shirt, right?
Well, if they go 3-0, I will make everyone a national championship T-shirt. Not to say that they can't compete in all those games, but that is a very difficult stretch. You're talking about a Missouri team that's probably one of the top 5 in the country at Texas Tech on its home field, and Virginia Tech obviously didn't get off to a great start, but that's going to be a physical game for Nebraska. So yeah, if they would get to go 3-0, there's still big challenges awaiting, like Oklahoma at Oklahoma, but at the same time, we'll worry about that when it comes to.
All right, so usually at this point I'll ask you your prediction for this week. Tell me after 3 games what your prediction is for Huskers season-wide.
It stays. I'm staying with 7-5. There's really nothing that I've seen in the first 3 games to make me think better or worse than I initially thought. I think the defense, they allowed some big plays early, but yet it seems like you can see that confidence developing. The offense, maybe not quite as potent, especially in the running game, as they were hoping. So there's still some question marks there as far as how they're going to move the ball against a quality team like a Virginia Tech and Missouri. So still some questions out there, but I think most people are probably still holding with their original predictions.
Well, an off week can't hurt to get healed up and get ready for the rest of this long season. We'll be back next week to preview the Virginia Tech game. Until then, have a good off week. We'll see you next week.